done, but we're going to be taking a look at a task one mixed chart because I was just asked recently about how to do this. I also have, of course, our chat box up, so as I go through this, be sure if you have questions to let me know. But yeah, this is slightly unexpected. I wasn't expecting to go live today, but a student was asking me about these types of charts, so I wanted to make sure that you guys had some material to practice with. So yeah, we're going to be taking a look at this chart here, which again you can see is a mixed chart. So we have a chart that starts off just kind of with a line graph, and then the one below that is a bar graph. Now, I just want to give a quick reminder, if you're working on IELTS studying and things like that, I really encourage you to check out the website at fluentamerican.com because we have a full video course available for task 2. It talks about all the things from planning your writing, brainstorming, outlining, to writing conclusions, writing thesis statements, including also how to write hooks and to start your essays as well. So there's lots of information on there that you don't get in my YouTube videos. So if you're really studying for the test, I really encourage you take a look at fluentamerican.com and click on the IELTS tab for our full course. But let's take a look at this here. And again, we're going to try to do this in about 20 minutes or less is our goal. Try to hold us to time. I just found this chart. I never really looked at it, so I don't really know what's going on to try to keep it as an authentic experience for everybody. So let's take a look at our time. 56, 19, 56, 20. So let's try to end in about 20 minutes or so. So about 25. Okay, so let's begin with our first paragraph. And again, my suggestion, for task 1, for your first paragraph, don't waste your time just restating the question or restating just the basic info from the chart. I would really suggest going right into your overview to just start summarizing what you see. And since we have 2 charts here, that means you're going to want to give 2 summaries. Okay. So overall, the charts demonstrate that maybe between 1979 and 1999, what happens? The number of visits abroad and visits to the UK increased. Okay, so we can just, or maybe instead of abroad, maybe like visits, maybe like leaving the UK and visits to the UK increased. Especially for the UK residents leaving the country. Okay, so again, we're kind of summarizing that top chart. So again, overall, the charts demonstrate that between 1979 and 1999, the number of visits leaving the UK and visits to the UK increased, especially for numbers of UK residents leaving the country. Okay. Another thing you could say if you're worried about, for instance, word count, you're like, I don't know if I can finish, if I can write, it's hard for me to write 150 words. It's hard for me to write 200 words for task 1. So another option you could also say, like, especially for the former. In terms of the maybe like most popular countries for those with UK citizenship. Again, trying to introduce some words that we don't currently have. Or actually, we don't know if they're citizens. We just know that they're UK residents. So maybe citizenship's not the best word. For those who live in the UK. Who live, another word you could say is reside. In terms of the most, so again, in terms of the most popular countries for those who reside in the UK, maybe Western European countries, So again, namely Spain and France, but Western European countries saw greater numbers of tourists than maybe like all other destinations combined. Maybe all other listed destinations, because again, there may be other destinations too, but this chart's only showing a couple. Okay. Great. Okay, so this again would be an overview, and again, the goal of the overview is to just identify key trends. You don't need to go super crazy into specific details. You're just trying to identify key trends that you notice in the chart. Ideally, you're also trying to mix up your vocab so you're not repeating too many words over and over again. Okay, we're going to write the rest of this now, focusing on the top chart, and then once we finish that, we'll do the second chart. And then afterwards, if we still have some time, we'll go over some of the vocab things. Just another quick note too, once you have your overview done, you want to think about your structure. You want to think about how are you going to organize your paragraphs, and you want to be consistent. It's something that may sound simple, but it's something that I repeatedly see students struggle with. They write body paragraphs that just contain lots of information that doesn't necessarily fit together. So we want to make sure that every body paragraph has a theme that you stick to. So for instance, let's say for my chart about the visits to and from the UK, that first chart, I'm going to organize it by year. So I'm going to have a paragraph that's going to talk about the top chart, and it's going to discuss all that information by year or by decade. The top chart, maybe like which focuses on visits that made it to the UK or left the country, starts with a low of about 10 million for the 10 million visits from maybe like foreigners. So it's just a low of about 10 million visits from foreigners and 12 million visits from UK residents that traveled abroad. Let me just check that again to make sure it makes sense. So the top chart, which focuses on visits that made it to the UK or left the country, starts with a low of about 10 million visits from foreigners and 12 million visits from UK residents that traveled abroad. Maybe another, instead of saying abroad, maybe we could say like overseas. Okay. For both these groups, as I'm going through this too, I do have the chat box open. So if you guys have questions as I'm writing this, be sure to put something in the chat box and I'll try my best to answer. For both these groups, modest increases were seen through the year. So we notice, I'm just looking at the line chart, and we can see that the numbers kind of have this regular trend up until around, what year is that? Maybe 1980, I guess like 1985-ish. Okay. So that's that first real bend that I see right around 1985. With both these groups, modest increases were seen with residents, or maybe with, how many is that? Visits abroad by UK residents. About 20 million. With 20 million UK residents traveling internationally. And I don't know, 11 to 12 million foreigners visiting the UK. From this point until the end of the period, numbers grew at a higher rate. Okay, so one thing I can see that in general for this chart, the numbers from this point on are relatively consistent. So from like 1985 to 1999, that line isn't really changing a whole lot. And that's the same thing for, I would say, for both groups. So I think it would be okay if you lump the rest of the data together. So by 1999, the figures for to the UK grew to about, what was it, about, I don't know, 25, 26 million. Grew at a higher. Maybe I'm going to go back to that previous sentence and say consistently higher rate, just to show that the numbers are relatively regular. So by 1999, the figures for visits to UK grew to about 26 million. And this UK grew to about 26 million, and the amount of UK visitors going abroad peaked at maybe like just over 50 million. Okay, so when I use just over, that means just like a little bit over. So like for instance, maybe 51 or 52. Okay, so 51 or 52 million. Okay, so that's my info for the first line chart. And one thing here, this is going to look long, but a lot of this is looking long because of the names for these groups is long by itself. You know, so like visits abroad by UK residents. That's a long title. You know, visits UK by overseas residents. That's a long title as well. So that's part of the reason why this paragraph's looking so long, is because we had to mention those groups so often, and that's making our paragraph look a little bit bloated, a little bit inflated. Let's now go to that second graph. In terms of the most maybe like common destinations, maybe the most common international destinations, France and Spain top the list with about 12 million and 9 million visits from UK residents, respectively. I'm using respectively to show that we talk about France and Spain first, then we talk about 12 million and 9 million in that same order. So France, 12 million, Spain, 9 million. So that, again, that's what respectively is doing. So if that's not a word that you're currently using in your task ones, it's definitely a word that's going to be super helpful to avoiding repetition and also showing some referencing. So I really would encourage you to get comfortable with using respectively if you're not currently using it. It's also a word, though, that you don't want to use too often. I would say maybe use it once in your task one. Try not to use it more than that because it's a pretty particular structure. What's the third? What's the third most popular? What's the third most popular site? Though it only received about 4 million visitors. Greece and Turkey rounded out the list. The former, another way, so I mentioned again, try not to use respectively too much. Another option that you can use is like former and latter. It's like former referring to the first thing you mentioned, latter referencing the second thing you mentioned. So again, it's like Greece and Turkey round out the list with the former. With the former welcoming, so Greece had about, I don't know, 2.53 million. 5 to 3 million UK residents. In the latter, about 2. In the latter, about 2 million. Okay, let's just to make sure I'm at the 150 mark. I believe I am. This looks like a lot, but so this is 231. And again, that middle paragraph really blew up our word count a bit because of those groups. Regardless, so let's kind of just read through this. So again, we still have some time. We started about 3:56, so this took about, we're at about what like a 15-minute mark. So let's just take a couple minutes just to kind of review everything we wrote, see if there's anything we want to adjust. Okay, so overall, the charts demonstrate that between 1979 and 1999, visits leaving the UK and visits to the UK increased. Especially for the former, in terms of the most popular countries. Yeah, I was confused myself for a minute with the former. Yeah, this looks good. In terms of the most popular countries for those who reside in UK, Western European countries, so again for Spain and France, saw greater numbers of tourists than all the other listed destinations combined. Cool. All right, let's look at our top chart again. The top chart focused on visits that made to UK or left the country. If you're looking for something that you can cut, this is something that you could cut. You don't really need this part right here. Okay. Starts with a low of about 10 million visits from foreigners and 12 million visits from the residents that traveled overseas. Both these groups, modest increases were seen through the year 1985. Okay, so we talk again about that pivot point at 1985. 20 million UK residents traveling internationally, and then people visiting. Cool, looks good. From this point until the end of the period, you know, this is another place you could have shortened a little bit. You could just say from here. You know, from here the numbers grew at a consistently higher rate. By 1999, the figures for visits grew to about 26 million. Actually, a little bit better for tenths. By 1999, the figures had grown and then had peaked. Just to kind of tenths-wise, I think that's a little bit more precise. Okay. Not seeing any questions so far, so I'm going to keep going. In terms of the most common international destinations, France and Spain are at the top, 12 million, 9 million. USA was third most popular site. Maybe like for the demographic, I'm just going to add that because, again, that way we're emphasizing that we're talking about those UK residents. They only received about 4 million visitors. Greece and Turkey rounded out the list, former welcoming about 25 to 3 million, and the latter about 2 million. Okay, so yeah, so I think this is incorporating all the information from these charts. If you're watching this at a different time, be sure to leave a comment if there's something that you're not sure about, your questions about, and I'll do my best to respond. And again, if you're trying to get more information about how to plan, how to write, especially task twos and things like that, I really encourage you check out our site, Fluent American. We have our video course, which again has content that you won't find in our YouTube videos. You can either get the whole package, or you can also choose individual courses that are right for you. You can also submit your own writing tasks. So if you're trying to get your own writing evaluated and edited, definitely take a look at our packages, so that way you can submit your writing per task. All right, guys, thank you so much for your time. I always appreciate it. I hope you have a good day, have a good night, and a good afternoon. You take care.